I grew up in England in the early 1950s, and all the stuff of war was around me, and I became fascinated by the Second World War. D-Day itself became a focal point of my interest. I decided that I would like to live a dream and move to France and take people around all these areas, the battlefields, and put over my passion for this tremendous world-shaking event. The director and the producer came up with the idea of, well, why don't we do a film about one of your tours? Unbeknown to me, he had assembled quite a considerable archive of interviews, none of which anybody had ever seen. And he said, look, I've got some ideas, we can make this really rather unique. The obvious place to me to start was Sainte-Mère-Église, the first place to be liberated by the Americans. And that was anyway the place where all of the D-Day junkies want to go. I'm about to climb into this C-47. As you can see, I am really loaded down with about 150 pounds of equipment. One of the most difficult things was we decided that we would shoot the events in the real time in which they occurred. So that meant being at Omaha Beach at about 6:30 in the morning. The German crews would have spent the night listening to distant bombardment. Imagine the shock when they spotted the Allied Armada on the horizon. The weather was exactly as it was on the 6th of June, slightly windy, overcast. It was absolutely perfect.
Meine Herren, es scheint, als hätten wir Probleme. Ich erbitte um Lagebericht.
These 155mm guns would have swung into action, and the shells would have screeched off into the early morning air. One of the things about my touring, I used to think to myself, God, if I'd had a veteran here, just, wheel him out, and like this veteran could say to these people, this is what it was like. This is really what happened. Well, we're able to do this on the film.
Artillery rounds were coming in. Several of the boats had struck mines, and this is when the picture began to clear that we were in one hell of a mess.
It was from landing craft like this that the US infantrymen landed on the beaches of Normandy. Imagine being hurled into 6 feet of freezing water with yards of deadly beach to cross and very little cover. It was a bit of a shock to have to come splashing out of the waves at Omaha Beach at 6:30 in the morning. It was a bit cold. And also hanging from a rope ladder off the edge of Pointe du Hoc. This is scary. You've got to be young, fit, or stupid to do this in the face of determined German resistance. I was to be wearing the uniforms, I was to be carrying the equipment, and was to try to get involved with the action in these specific locations as realistically as possible. Climbing the cliffs was just the start. After a while, the cold and the wet just sort of faded into the distance as you began to get sort of fully immersed into trying to portray really what happened. They fought their way across the battery, using the craters for cover, but they were desperate to find the German guns. To try to bring some reality to the situation, we were going to portray this from the soldier's point of view. One of the things I found very daunting was trying to reenact a scenario whereby there's just nothing left. There's just a field, there is nothing. You have to portray this reality. In an adjacent field, there was 4 105mm German field guns, which were firing on Utah Beach in that direction. And the only way we could do this was to get props and my MG42 and smoke and things like this. By this stage, they'd stripped down to the bare essentials. A mixture of documentary, drama, reenactment. We had to try to portray the reality of trenches and guns and this incredible action that took place there. 3 men, Compton, Garnier and Malarkey, were ordered to throw grenades on the German machine gun after Lipton's burst of fire. In actual fact, I do remember with some amusement, the director asked me to throw a grenade. Well, the grenade was part of my collection, and I'd always assumed that it had been properly deactivated. So I threw the grenade all right. There was another member of the film crew waiting to pick it up, and there was a shout from the other side of the hedge because the thing had landed in the grass and it was smoking. Obviously, it had not been quite as well deactivated as I had previously thought. One of the aspects was the use of my 1943 Dodge Command car, which I love to drive, and we use this as a link between locations. But we also had a lot of help from outside people who saw what we were doing and said, yeah, we'll help. Particular mention is the Airborne Museum in St. Mary's. They allowed me to climb into their C-47, sit in their Waco glider. The Utah Beach Museum kindly let us into their landing craft. The Dead Man's Corner Museum very kindly lent me lots of props. And one young man called Cyril, mad about the Airborne, he was there to ensure that I was correctly dressed at all times. We enlisted the assistance of a very well-known figure, Captain Dale Dye, well known by most people through the series Band of Brothers. He assisted in the authenticity and the way I tried to portray the events as they happened. I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to present the Americans on D-Day.